and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. Welcome. And Kathy, you want to do a roll call for us?
Sure. Saban?
Present.
Petrakos?
Present.
Bergbauer?
Present.
Galopoli?
Here.
Vandermeer?
Here.
Deskin?
Here.
Bartleson? Here. And Peretta?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, very good. I see Pastor Ernest from the police department's here today. You want to open us in a prayer?
Please pray with me. Mighty Father, we acknowledge that you are our leader, all-powerful, all-knowing. At this time, we would like to lean on your guidance and your strength. Lead us tonight. Bring peace, bring joy, bring unity, and lead our mayor and this city council in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ernest. All right, my friends, liaison reports. Anybody have anything they want to talk about?
Yes.
Go ahead.
We'll start with Renee.
Yeah,
How's that?
start
Renee
down
never
there.
goes first.
Yeah, go Renee.
Okay, just a little update on the Lockport Live. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the meeting, but I do have the notes from it. We're moving along. We've actually chosen a logo, which will be going on the Facebook page pretty soon. We're going to be working on some events for a summer art series to bring people into the downtown area and keep things rolling along, as well as do some programs with the Roxy Theater. We're also working on some lighting to get the gateways lit up so that there's no dark corners and things like that when the construction is going on. So also the business owners will be updated, hopefully on a weekly basis, as to the construction that's going on currently.
Right on. Very good. Thank you, Renee. All right. Who else has something? Jim?
Not technically under intergovernmental liaison, but I keep forgetting to bring this in. So we had the Boy Scouts store ribbon cutting a couple weeks ago, and they dedicated a brick. Temporary right now, they're actually going to engrave some bricks, but they wanted to thank the city of Lockport. They had some other people that helped them, but the city of Lockport for helping them with the building and everything and working with them. So this is just a temporary one, but they'll put a solid brick, engraved brick in front of their steps pretty soon.
All right. Very fun.
You
Have
can
you guys been in there yet?
No, not yet.
Anyone? It's actually pretty cool. It's the Boy Scout headquarters is where the old planning and zoning building used to be. The first floor is retail, so if you want to buy your merit badge, you can. Or one of those cool Smokey the Bear Boy Scout hats, So it's actually a pretty interesting place. I'm glad they're here.
Actually, it's got some pretty cool camping stuff too, so it's not just for Boy Scouts. So if
Right.
you have anything, you need anything camping-wise, you can go there and attend, so it's pretty nice.
No, it's a great addition. All right, very good. What else? Anybody?
Go ahead. 'Cause-
No. Go.
Well, I'm going to ask Ben about wells, so why don't you two
Okay.
go first?
Oh,
All right.
yeah, heavens.
Mine is just real quick. I've had a couple residents ask if there's any way that we can contact, maybe perhaps it's IDOT for the lights that are on 159th Street for the turning signal. Now that the traffic has increased, with the trucks and so forth, and the time that it takes a semi to make a left-hand turn, some people are not able to make that light anymore, the turning signal.
159th and what?
In Gauger, correct.
Gauger.
I'm sorry.
I've waited 3 lights at some points. I'm like in the lane now to turn left.
So the request is there any way that we can contact whoever's in charge of the lights to make that turning signal longer so that people can get through instead of waiting 2 or 3 lights to get through?
We can contact IDOT, and they can come out and do a signal evaluation and let us know.
The main time for that was 9 o'clock when UPS lets out all their trucks. If you remember when we went through the store, they all leave at the same time. So I was stuck behind at least 6 of them, and there was a whole pile behind me. And so mental note not to go there that way at 9 o'clock anymore. So, but that was probably, maybe that's when they got stuck too, was one of those big times.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely reach out to them.
Thank you.
I'll do my police liaison.
Please.
Nose Shave November raised $1,600, and so that was and it's going toward cancer research. And each of the officers won different types of awards. Chief won the Brittle Beard Award, so that was what he got. And then Two important things that are coming up on December 16th. We have our Lockport Love Distribution Day. It will be meeting at 9 a.m. at Iron Horse, and then we will go distribute to some of the families. We have 10 families this year. And then following that will be Shop with the Cop on December 16th.
All right, very good, thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple things. Number one is the Illinois State Museum had their grand opening for the new exhibit called Plein Air, and it was artwork that was done during the Summer Art Series, and there's just some really amazing things in there. Things you see every day, and then the interpretation that the artist did of things I just recommend everybody go down. It's going to be down there for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months, so that's a really good thing. And then I understand we have a well update. Is that correct, Mr. Can?
That is correct. If we can just spend a few minutes this evening, we do have Strand here, Chris Holm. One of the things that he and I have been working through is where do we really sit with the water in the city, and what kind of requirements do we have. We've got a lot of good studies that have been done to get us to this point, but there's a lot of information out there, and so Chris and I put our heads together a little bit, and we just came up with a little bit of a very brief discussion. Again, 5 different, I think it's 5 slides, but just a brief discussion just to make sure everybody understands where we are and then where we're going here in the near future. Won't take up very much of your time, but again, just wanted to kind of update everybody. So with that, Chris?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having me here tonight. It's a great opportunity to catch up, but also during some of the more recent process, we've got some new council people up here that it's great to catch them up. And then during some of the recent processes, there was a little bit of confusion about what type of well you currently have, what type of well you'll be getting, and some reasoning behind that. So it's good to cover those things. Hopefully you all have the handouts in front of you. First slide just shows that 2 groundwater sources are available to the city for drinking water supply. And those 2 are on the right-hand side of that figure. There are sand and gravel wells in this area. Sand and gravel wells are typically very shallow. None in the Lockport corporate boundaries, though. A little bit further to the south in the Joliet, New Lenox area, there are some of those. What Lockport has now is 6 shallow bedrock wells. That's the one in the middle. You can see those are roughly 400 feet deep. These, we put the symbol of the dragonfly there. These are the ones that have a potential impact on some environmentally sensitive areas. I'll get into that a little bit more. And then a lot of the communities nearby also use the Ironton-Galesville formation for Ironton-Galesville, or deep sandstone wells is what those would be called. And those are, 16, 17, 1,800 feet deep, significantly deeper. And the radium symbol there, I probably should have just put the chemical nomenclature for radium rather than the radioactive symbol, because that's kind of overpowering, but it does have naturally occurring radium in that well, in that aquifer. Next slide shows more detail of the geology. Reveals that the separation between the 2 sources and the reason why there are different concerns for those 2 sources. So a little bit more detail showing which, the different types of strata of the earth that you're tapping into, and the well construction. So if you look at the shallow bedrock well, you can see that it goes down through the Silurian dolomite, through a shale layer, and down into limestone. That Silurian dolomite layer, if you look, it's about 75 feet deep where your wells are at on the east side of town. The Silurian dolomite layer is very exposed on the west side of town. As you come down the hill, the canal was actually carved out through the Silurian dolomite as it was constructed. The bedrock is very shallow in that area. So this is why that water that you're drawing from in the Silurian dolomite is hydraulically connected to the dragonfly and the environmentally sensitive habitat. So again, you have 6 of those wells. You used to have deep wells. In town, you had 3, I believe. In town, several years ago, the decision was made based on the radium. There was plenty of water available in the shallow bedrock well. The environmentally sensitive areas have grown since those decisions were made. But you capped and abandoned your deep wells in order to not have to deal with the radium issue. You can see by the construction of the radium wells that the thicker lines that go along that as it goes down to 1,000 feet, that's actually steel casing pipe and concrete that goes around the outside of that. So there's no way that the water from the Silurian dolomite or the limestone or the St. Peter sandstone gets into those deep wells. So these two wells can be placed right next to each other, these two different types of wells, and they won't interact with each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, we're following. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So let's go into, briefly, I got 3 more slides left. Go into concerns. Shallow bedrock well concerns, we've been talking about that. Environmentally sensitive habitats. The area that's hatched in red there is the area that IDNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, has deemed to be off limits on that aquifer because it has the potential to impact 2 seeps, 2 environmentally sensitive areas and endangered species.
Everything looks like it's hatched red.
Yeah, thank you.
The whole city's?
Yes. So there is one area of the city that is okay, and if you look in the lower right-hand corner, I-355, nope, I went too far with the hatching there. I-355, Prime Boulevard, the Prime Industrial Park area, and Kohler Farm, near well 12 on there. They said, although it's in the area that is the recharge area for that, they have said east of I-355, basically the Division Street line, they will allow an additional deep well. The Kohler Farm piece, the Ridge Development maybe is what it was called, that would have been on that blue line. The blue lines are what a previous study has determined to be fractures in the Silurian dolomite, which would help supply more water supply. And that goes down then through the ComEd piece and then into Prime Development.
Chris, can you use the mouse and show everyone?
Oh, I'm sorry. So this area in here is an area, or the last remaining area, and it actually, they extended it through Prime. So basically this area here, IDNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife has stated that they will allow another shallow well in that area. Limiting returns is a concern. You can see we've got well 13 out here, well 12, and well 6. So if everybody can mentally draw a line between those wells, if you put another well along that line, there is a good possibility that you're basically just robbing from one to pump the other. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 won't equal 3 anymore. 1 plus 1 plus 1 will equal 2 still, if that makes sense. So that's, we want to push it further to the north and be up on that blue line that stems out of well 6. That would be the ideal location, even further to the east of the piece that was mentioned there, would be a viable spot for a shallow well. But that's about it, without some, a battle of sorts. Deep well Ironton Galesville concerns is the declining water levels. The city of Joliet, the village of Romeoville, Shanahan, Lamont, these are just a few. Shorewood, these communities are all using the Ironton Galesville as their source. And these figures here are from the U.S. Or the Illinois State Geological Survey. And they've determined it's a fact that this aquifer is declining. It is being pumped at a higher rate in this area than it can sustain. The epicenter of the cone of depression, as they call it, is in about the center of Joliet, on the other side of the river. So with deep wells, that's why we want to push any deep wells that we would do, including well 15, which is the next well on the books. We want to push those as far to the north side of the city as possible to keep them away from that epicenter. All these graphics covered up my text on the bottom, and that's making me angry right now. I'm sorry about that. So based on historic demands and current available supply, the city needs one additional water supply well at this time. That's what this graph, I don't know if I could have possibly made it more busy, but I'm going to explain it out here. So these bar charts are, before today, are the historical trends in what we're seeing for flow demands. And then after today, it's been picking up recently. After today, these are projections. So the green bars are a low growth rate projection. If you grow at a slow rate only to a level of 40,000 people by 2050, 40,000 people by 2050, that would follow the trend line of this green bars as they go out. If you follow a median growth rate of 54,000 people by 2050, bless you, by 2050, then that would follow the blue bar charts. And then the high growth rate, which is based on CMAP information, going out to 68,000 people by 2050, that would follow the purple charts. Now, the red lines indicate your firm supply capacity. This is how much water that can be supplied. Right now, your water supply, your firm water supply, which is how much you can supply if your largest pump is out of service, you have to design for something to go wrong, is here at roughly, I'm sorry, now that well 14 is up and running again, it's up around 6 million gallons a day. But you can see that based on the trends that firm supply capacity is not going to meet demands much longer. And that's why we've moved forward with well 15. Well 15 then will bump your firm supply capacity up closer to 7.5 million gallons a day. And so what I want to show here is if you stretch that out at a high growth rate, you're going to cross that line of demands, roughly 2022, 2023. At a median growth rate, you'll be able to push it out 2025, 2026. At a low growth rate, you're talking about going all the way out to 2034. These are just predictions. These are just forecasts. You have to watch how much water you're actually using and make decisions based on what trends you're seeing. But this deep well 15 that is in the works right now should carry you out for several years, depending on your growth rate, more if it's lower, less if it's not.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Again, the reason that Chris and I wanted to bring this forward was because there are, as Chris mentioned, quite a few new alder men and women on the council, and these are big dollar amount. These are big items, and so we wanted to make sure that everybody understood this. So I asked Chris to kind of go through the very technical nature. Shallow wells, again, shallow wells, the issue is the dragonfly. Deep wells, the issue is the radium. And the radium is easily treatable, not easily treatable, but is treatable. The next thing with the deep wells is, again, it's slide number 4 here, which is that the aquifer that we would be draining on, thank you, Chris, the aquifer that we would be pulling from is not recharging at a rate that is sustainable if things continued. So there are some challenging decisions and some challenging times ahead, for the entire area. As Chris mentioned, everybody's kind of in the same boat. But I wanted to bring this, to councils, the forefront as we move forward, so that everybody kind of understands some of the challenges we are facing. Don't want to, it's not doom and gloom. We're in a good spot. We're planning for the future, but also the fifth slide was kind of where we wanted to get to, and these are some of the things that you can plan for the worst, you can plan for the minimum growth, and these are things that, again, we're trying to do, and we're trying not to overbuild and overplan, but we want to be ready. So again, this is why this chart we want to come to a little bit of an understanding and just give council some food for thought. If we, if we grow to 40,000 by 2050, or if we go to 68,000 by 2050, is it going to be somewhere in between? Is it going to be less, more? But just so you guys can understand, we wanted to make sure that everybody was, given the same information. There's been a lot put out there in the past. You can see where we were in 2010. You can see we were up at 10 MGD. So our production was far outpacing what our actual demand was. So our supply was way up here, our demand was here. As everybody can see too, with appliances, fixtures in your house, everything is becoming less or more efficient. Less water is being needed. So supplies our demand is going down, or staying consistent even as our growth in the city as far as population goes up. One of the other things that we noticed, and I've talked with our water department quite a bit about this, is when we did increase rates a little bit a couple years ago, again, the demand actually comes down, which is, it makes sense. People may not water their grass as much, maybe a little more cognizant when they're taking a shower, those types of things. So there is some correlation with that. And again, these are some things that I just wanted to bring to council, because one of the things that sticks out to me is, why were we producing so much 7 years ago? Why don't we need that today? And so that's where I've asked Chris, and we've beat this thing up from a lot of different directions. And like I said, just wanted to kind of bring you guys, bring council just some information, so moving forward you can understand kind of where our decisions are being made, why we're making these decisions, and how we're coming to the conclusions we're coming to.
I've got a couple of comments. The answer to the question is, why do we have a greater capacity than we do now? Well, it's really quite simple. Is we had some wells that were taken off of line that shouldn't have been taken off of line. Okay, those are wells 5 and 8, which are over by the police station. Now, I have two things that I would like to pursue over the next couple years. Okay, number one here is, now the reason why, for the public to understand, the reason why we're in such a small area is, back in March of 2015, U.S. Fish and Wildlife sent us an extremely arbitrary "thou shalt not drill within 2 miles of the Heinz emerald dragonfly habitat." When myself and I believe Chris was at least one meeting, and I know Ben was at both meetings, I challenged the Fish and Wildlife to go and actually produce the data that they use to go ahead to make this decision. They don't have any data. All the data they have is from observation wells on the west side of the river. When I asked them for the data on the east side of the river, they said they didn't have any. They wanted us to go ahead and do a study for them, which we're not going to do. I think they ought to pay for the study if they're going to go ahead and say that, okay. And so for about 2 years now, we've been extremely passive, saying, well, okay, we're not going to pursue that, but I think we need to pursue that. Okay, because they don't have any data. There's absolutely no data to support their position, and I know that is because I actually used their data, plotted the well points using GPS, the longitude and latitude. And so it was just arbitrary. They just made it up. Which brings me back to, if you go to the shallow bedrock well concerns, okay, if we go ahead and there's extremely interesting, if you go to well 5 and 8, which is over by the police station, we have this empty, non-cross-hatched area. Is that supposed to be there or not supposed to be there?
Darren, why don't you wrap this up?
Well, I want to wrap, well, we have to have this discussion.
Yeah, but you should put it on the agenda next time, man.
I didn't know he was going to be here. Okay?
Brent, put it on the agenda next time.
So what I want to know here is,
You would catch resistance with them because of the fractures and the
that
direction
is
the water
outside
flows.
the 2-mile radius.
It is not outside the 2-mile radius for the long run seat. So that's already met with resistance in that whole area.
Well, I think we need to pursue that. I think we need to pursue it. We have to get the data. I want to see their data, 2017, 2018 data, not, well, we did something back in 2007, so we think this might be applicable, because that's just junk science.
Right. And I don't disagree with pursuit. The time factor, though, is what drove to going to the deep.
Well, I
Versus
understand
the
that
shallow.
for 15, but I'm talking about the wells
Absolutely.
in 2022, 2024, 2026, when we're looking at that.
Right.
Okay, we've got 3, 4, 5 years to go ahead and get this thing.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thanks,
for the
Chris.
update. All right, let's keep rolling. Ben, what do you got, CA1?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, CA1 is a service agreement request with Comcast for installation of dedicated fiber services for Lockport City Hall to connect to the police department and the public works facilities. There's a packet and a drawing, a diagram of some of the lines that we're proposing in your packet. Back in 2012, the Lockport entered a franchise agreement with Comcast. The Comcast agreement allows us to share some of their revenues in the Lockport service area. Just as an example, in 2017, the estimate is over $300,000 to the city of Lockport for the shared revenue of the Comcast services they're selling in this area. Right now, the city is also paying about $1,800 a month in communication services through Call One AT&T for some point-to-points, as well as some Comcast internet service charges. But the current communication connections are not meeting our needs with the new BSNA software. We've also had some poor phone quality connections and things that have been going on. We've talked to Call One, we've talked to AT&T, and really, with the phones being internet-based, Comcast is the best solution for us to solve these issues. Public Works is also the EMA center, and we want to make sure that those capabilities are brought up to where they need to be as soon as possible. We've got the funding in the budget for 2018. We put a $30,000 allocation in to increase these services. The increased services will be about $28,000 a year, or about $2,351 a month. Staff's recommending moving forward with these services so that we can fully utilize the new software connections throughout the business modalities of the city and improve phone quality. I do have reps here from Comcast if you have any other questions, but I have a service agreement in their packet. And again, this is trying to get better communication throughout the city.
All right, thoughts, comments, concerns? All seem reasonable thing to pursue?
Was it a term for 72 months? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, so we had gone back and forth with them, whether it was 60 months or 72 months, and we're trying to get the best spread out of the cost we can at 72 months.
I was just thinking that maybe in 5.5 years there'd be new technology. So that was my question. I mean, or
Sure.
updated technology. So I just wanted to make sure.
Fiber's been around for a long time. I don't know if there's anything replacing it, sure.
It's moving fast.
Just so everyone's clear, I spent a lot of time talking to Ben about this. There was originally a cost to get it to Public Works of,
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Where Public Works is almost on an island where it is located beyond the Bow Dome in the Prime Business Park. I think when it was built, they were hopeful that more business would come out there at the time, but 10 years has gone by and they're still really the only facility that south into the park. Comcast has utilities available out on the right-of-way by 167th, but to pull these lines all the way down to our facility, that's the bulk of the cost, and the bulk of the cost for those increases is to run that line and pay for those additional service costs to recoup that to Public Works. Adding the other modalities to the police department wasn't all that much. There's a lot of fiber over in that area. It's just it's so isolated by the tollway. But again, we feel it's an important part of our emergency operations plan, and we need to get better communication out there.
so I asked all the other questions, right? Like regular utility, is there recapture if that Prime Business Park gets filled up? Do we do any of that stuff? I was told no, that's not something over there. So essentially this 5.5-year contract is essentially a lease for us, and then at that end, it should drop because it's just providing service. Because I think this
The
program.
kind of answers it if it fills up.
Yeah, or if there's a new technology that comes out, sure.
Right, and at that point, we can change and do whatever, but instead of having that lump sum payment right now, we're financing essentially, or putting that through there, so But just wanted to let you know the questions that I'd asked out there.
Okay, what are you looking for now, Ben?
If everyone's agreeable to letting us do this, we'll request to put it on consent, and we can move forward with it after the holidays.
All right, anybody have an issue with that? We good? Okay, consent, please. All right, CA2.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. CA2 is a resolution approving the release of a letter of credit with Mahalich Estates, Resolution 17101. This is a development that has been pretty dormant for some time. We've got 2 townhomes and a single-family home built out there, and they've originally had a letter of credit that was over $300,000. It's been reduced down to $56,000. They put in the final lift. We've done some inspections. They put in the historic lighting that was required. We've really gone to the point where it's just going to be bonded lot by lot, like we've done with some of the other older aging subdivisions that haven't had a lot of activity. This developer would like, is owned by a gentleman that's aging and would like to move on. He's going to sell it to another builder. We've discussed it with the builder that we would like to bond each parcel out piece by piece as we go forward with this. The only other thing that's left open is some maintenance issues with some spoil piles and trees, and we included some photographs of what they were. That new buyer is going to be required to knock those down in order to get any building permits. So they're all aware of that. Everyone seems agreeable to move forward. And the banks and the financing want to see that LLC release for the new buyer, and we're willing to work with them on a case-by-case basis for each parcel going forward.
All right. Thoughts, concerns there, crew?
I'm happy about this. This is directly across the street from my house, and for many years it was just unkept, and so I'm happy about this.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't have an issue either. I mean, I know what you're talking about over there. So it's just a consent agenda agreement?
Be fine.
Okay.
And you talked to Brent about all that as well?
All right. Let's keep rolling. Lisa, you up next?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the time of the year that we need to renew our property liability insurance and our workers' comp, so Maggie worked pretty diligently on this to take a look at all of our property assets and make sure we had an up-to-date list given to the insurance company. So they went out for bid this year, and the lowest price came from Argonaut Trident Insurance Company. So last year, right now, we have Travelers. Argonaut came with the lowest bid. It's a 26% decrease from what we're paying right now, so that's pretty favorable. From the workers' comp perspective, the decrease is 6.5%. So overall, we're looking to save quite a bit of money into the next year. Sunny has reviewed the contract because this is a new carrier, and she's asking for a couple of different changes. They have not gotten back to us about this, but she's looking for some increase in coverage. Do you want to just touch on what you were looking for?
There's just a couple of definitions under the police liability issue on whether or not the coverage should be claim-based or occurrence-based. And so we're in discussion, and we're waiting back from them. And hopefully we'll get the full consensus for the final contract, and it should be on the action item for next council meeting.
Yes, because this contract,
and also increasing the liability amount too.
Yeah, from 1 million to 3 million is what you were
3
looking for?
for occurrence, and then 5 aggregate amount.
5 for aggregate. So that's what we're looking for, and there may be some increased cost from that, but she brought those up to us today, so they haven't gotten back to us yet. So we'll come back under action item the next time, but we will have to wrap it up because our contract will expire at the end of this year. So it's overall, it looks good. Nice favorable savings here for the city.
I just had a quick question, and you could probably answer it. Under valuable papers, it says 100,000. I just wanted to know, does that mean we cover the other people that rent with us? So like we have our Historical Genealogy Society here, we've got Lipinski here, the Chamber here. How does that pan out with our liability? Or are they all excluded from that if there was ever a claim? They should have their own coverage.
They should have their own coverage.
So is that how it works? They all have their own coverage then?
Under the lease agreement, they would have their own.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because I'm guessing you can't put really a price value on some of that.
Right.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, if you're negotiating with them and talking to them, I gave a list of stuff that just stood out. If you guys
Yes, I
make
do
sure.
have some answers for you I thought Ben had gotten back to you with those questions.
As long as you guys are looking through each one of the line items, we can go, we don't have to bore everyone here, but there are some things that, like we saw in there, like spoilage, right? you'd be like, hey, that's for restaurants and stuff like that. But as long as you guys are looking at it and
Yes, so we did address the spoilage and the premises boundary that you had identified, and she said that even though that coverage is in here, there's no cost to that piece of
Okay.
it for us because it doesn't really apply to us, but they still list it down there because they have, like a blanket type of policy that they put out there.
Sure.
But there was no cost associated with those.
The aerial device?
The newly acquired property, that's a figure they put out there. So if anybody donates property to us, or if we purchase some new property and we don't get it to them and something happens, like we don't call them and say, here, add this piece, it's just an overall coverage for us from that. So it's kind of a blanket coverage for anything that comes into the city in between a year.
Okay.
You said you had a question about outdoor property. That's only trees and shrubs. I'm not sure what else.
I think the dollar amount on there was like, what are we?
Yeah, that's it. It's just for trees and shrubs because we had the fence that knocked down at Public Works and they wouldn't cover that.
Wasn't a number like $100,000 or something of coverage? Or-
$2,500
that was
for any one tree. The total limit was $50,000. I have it right here in front of me.
All right. Newly acquired construction, premises boundary increase limit, right? Property in transit, property off premises, spoilage, valuable papers. And if these are all in what our base insurance is, and it doesn't cost you anything,
Right.
that's fine. But that came out that said additional services, and they talked about like a drone, like something was base, and then something was additional coverage for something flyable or a drone. I was like, we don't have a drone.
So we don't. I've confirmed we do not have any type of drones or unmanned aircrafts here. But what she said is that if somebody else has one and they injure our property, so if they cause damage to our property and they don't have insurance that will cover it, they will cover that. So that's more for if somebody else is flying a drone and runs it into our city hall, causes damage.
Wow.
Okay, so the drone isn't just for us to own, it's for anybody else who has a drone that may run it into our property. Okay, and I think you circled some things about contents. Back in 2014, we had a valuation done of the city in our contents. So those figures are based on that. We probably should evaluate maybe every 5 years and have that again, but those are based on that evaluation.
Okay.
Okay? So I think that might have been all your questions.
Yeah, that somebody's actually looking at, I do that with my company, right? We've got all the additional coverage, there's a lot of stuff that's just covered in there, and then they're like, it's a la carte. Did you want this also? Did you want this also? So,
There was very few a la carte in here for us, so
okay.
it's mostly all packaged together. So I think overall, we've got, a pretty good package here. It's just buttoning up a couple little things, but we'll come back, bring you any of those changes for the next time, because we do have to clean it up next meeting.
All right, do we need to put an action item then, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do it as an action item, and we'll find out everything. Okay, sounds good. And then you have a budget amendment?
Yes, this is just some cleanup here for the end of the year. We don't always have to do an amendment, but if we are going to exceed the budget in any department for the year from what was approved in the budget originally, we have to do a budget amendment so that we're not written up by the auditors, we're not exceeding what our appropriation amount is. So there's a few items that we identified where we'll end up going over. One is in the commuter lot, the train station. We got a grant from Metra, so we had revenue and then we had expense to do the HVAC and the flooring there. Another line item that we had to increase was in the development department for consultants. We get reimbursed from those developers, but sometimes it may be 1 or 2 years until that development is done. So we had an increase in expense because we had a whole lot of development going on this year, things that were being built. So we had increased costs, so we need to make sure we acknowledge that in our budget. I also mentioned the fence at Prime. That came down. It wasn't covered by insurance. We had $14,000 that we had to come up with. So the Prime budget is really small. It doesn't allow for us to have a whole lot of contingencies there. So we had to make an adjustment for that. And then really the last item was the city had to start billing itself for water. So the water and sewer department uses a large amount of water, and we're recognizing revenue and we're recognizing expense. So it's a wash, really doesn't mean anything, but it still made our expenses go over budget for those two areas. So these are just minor cleanups. Net effect is really not very much. You see the net effect, I think, was like $1,700 in the surplus. So we're not looking at really spending or bringing the city into a deficit situation at all. It's just cleaning up so that we're in line with the budget. So that's what I'm looking for.
All right, crossing your Ts and dotting your Is.
Yes.
All right, any questions, concerns? Okay, all makes
Mayor, real
sense.
quick, with Darren's putting something on the agenda for next time with the wells and everything, part of that is, are you not? No, then never mind. Never mind.
Okay.
Okay,
So consent, okay?
yes, consent is fine.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
All right, who's taking this? CED1.
I am.
All right, Pam, lay it on us.
Thank you. So this evening is the official presentation to the committee of the long-awaited Development Code update. As you may recall, back in September, we provided an initial preliminary draft of the Development Code. It did not include standard detail and specifications or easement language or signature blocks or certificates, as they were under review at that time. The Development Code that's currently in place was adopted sometime in 1979. Since that time frame, there have been various amendments that have been proposed and approved. In 2016, we finally decided to engage the services of J.J. Bennis, our development engineering consultant, to help us with doing a comprehensive overhaul of the document. I did include another copy of the summary of the proposed changes, which were presented back in September 1st. These changes are a result of current practices used by the city, as well as best engineering and management practices. The Community Development Department, along with the Public Works and Engineering Department, reviewed each section and provided comments, which did get incorporated into the document. There are a couple sections of the Development Code which will be taken out and moved to more appropriate locations, such as the landscaping section that will be moved to the zoning ordinance. There's a section called residential disclosure, which will also be deleted and incorporated more appropriately into Chapter 152, which deals with the building code and property maintenance. And then there's a lot grading section from the building code, which will get transferred into the development code. In addition, we're going to have two documents associated for development. The first one will be primarily the codes, the regulations, the provisions, which will be the development code. And then we're working on putting together what's called a development details and specifications manual, which will incorporate the standard details and specifications, the appropriate easement language, as well as the signature blocks and certificates. This is going to be a separate document because it's almost a live document, and each year staff is going to sit down internally and look to make sure that the details and specs, as well as the appropriate language, remains updated and appropriate. We will also include a title page at some point with a table of contents, and that will be put into the final versions of both documents. Jim Darnell is present this evening to provide a general overview of the proposed revisions and respond to any questions or comments that you might have.
Mayor, council members, thank you for having me tonight. This has been quite an undertaking. And I know that the copies that have been given to you, it's quite a package and quite a lot to go through. If you have questions or anything, I don't expect a lot of questions tonight. If you have questions in the future or comments, you can get those to Pam and Brent, and then they'll contact us and we'll address all of those. I just wanted to go over kind of the big items that were revised in the code. The last 35 years, a lot of things have changed. There were many outdated references, especially with regards to IDOT design manuals and IDOT guidelines. Many of those reference materials are no longer used by IDOT. And there was almost no mention of the Will County Stormwater Management Ordinance in the Development Code, and that's something that we have to follow now. It also includes a clarification of the city review procedures for basically the 3 steps of development: the concept plan submittal, the preliminary plan submittal, and the final plan submittal, which I don't think that was very clearly stated before. As Pam mentioned, Section 15350-120, the landscaping ordinance is being removed and moving it to the zoning code or as a standalone ordinance. Chapter 15360 was the Lowlands Conservancy Regulations. This was a document that regulated development in the floodplain area of the down near the river. It is out of date. Wetlands are now regulated by the Will County Stormwater Management Ordinance and the Army Corps of Engineers. And the floodplain areas are now regulated by the Will County Stormwater Management Ordinance, FEMA, and the IDNR. And then, of course, the exhibits were taken out of the code and will be put into a separate document. And those exhibits have been updated to reflect current practices, and AutoCAD versions of those have been provided to the city.
If I could jump in here, Mayor, the idea was to get this all back into one package and get it presented to you, and then not necessarily bring it back in 2 weeks, maybe bring it back in a month and give you more time to review over the holidays.
Because it's such engaging reading.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Spend your Christmas reading this, please.
Read it by the fire with the kids.
So, I mean, but at your direction, we can bring it back for formal approval at any point or additional deliberation.
Look, I know it's long and arduous, so I do appreciate Jim, especially he's been doing a lot of this, J.J. Bennis, it's Pam, of course. So it's a lot, it's needed though, so thank you for, digging into something that's not necessarily, it's exciting for J.J. Bennis, but, okay. Thank you for the hard work.
All right.
Mayor, could I
Yes,
just have
please.
an explanation on the moving of the landscaping code, landscaping from the development code? How did that, was that for developers, or how was that effective and now moved to a zoning? Because I understand the part for the zoning, or for zoning code, but how did that, where did that get in, put into? What was it related to?
Why did it get moved?
Why did they move it to the zoning, or why are we recommending that it be moved to the zoning code? Landscaping requirements relate to not just development, but many other areas of town. People plant things, people want to do landscape improvements on their existing property. They're not really defined as development, but we still have requirements that they have to meet. And their landscape plans will have to be approved. So I think Pam can maybe.
So if we're moving it out of one section and just putting it for zoning code, the developers still have to follow certain
Absolutely.
codes? Okay.
Yeah, it falls under, it's no different than the design and development guidelines, which are included in the zoning ordinance as exhibits, as well as the bulk regulations. It's really a standard for development and very specific in particular areas on a site of what needs to be done. So it's more appropriate, and communities generally have them located in the zoning ordinance. It won't be changed initially, it's just going to be moved, because at some point we are going to have to do a comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance, and then at that time we would tackle that portion of it as well. But I just need to move it so that it stays effective. So my intention would be, as soon as I know when this is coming back, is to make sure that I can coordinate so that it's done concurrently when this gets approved, the zoning ordinance amendment to include the landscape ordinances on the same agenda.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You want to review that one when it comes through?
Yeah.
I do want to say it did take a while, right? But this is something that you don't change every year, so everyone's got to understand that. If you do have the time, I'm not saying over Christmas break, right? If it comes afterwards, please review it, because, and Pam, I also want, can you please distribute it to our planning commission also? Because some of that is this process of how they're doing things, right? I want to make sure everyone's got eyes on this, because this is the opportunity to change it. If there's something that's there. Darren, I know you are going to be reading it because you've been.
I've already read it.
Okay. You're way, way ahead of me right now. I looked at it, I was like, it's done. All right, let's look at it. So we want to look at it and get everyone's comments together, kind of meld them all together. Maybe there's some uniformity in that, and then change this once, present it to the board once, approve it once, and move forward. And hopefully this is good for 5, 10 years, right? We're there. So thanks for everyone's effort in doing this. It's a long time coming, where it's another step of kind of cleaning up our paperwork and policies and procedures. I think this is great. So let's, and it should make it easier for developers to come work with the city of Lockport, so.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone.
So if I can just, for clarification purposes, are we looking the second meeting in January, you think?
I think that's plenty of time.
Okay.
Yes.
So we should submit comments to Pam then? I have comments about a specific.
Why don't you send them to Pam, and why don't you copy Jim on it too? He's been kind of our
So we have
go-to guy for this.
We're gonna look at them all at the same time.
Yeah, but I'm already dealing with Brent on some things that I saw wrong with it, so, I mean.
Well, let's, are you guys okay with making Pam the lead on it, or Brent, do you want to be copied on it? How do you want to work it? It's up to you guys. You guys are the staff on this who are going to.
Well, we can just copy both of us, and then I'll just make sure that Jim gets it, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good if we can.
All right, so comments, let's send them both to Brent and Pam, and then they can disseminate it out.
Yeah, just, as long as we're not onesie twosies, right? We collect them all, we can sit down and talk about everyone's comments, maybe in January or something like that, right? At the end of January, and then decide what changes or updates.
So you want to see another committee of the whole then?
Yes.
At least one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think we'll meet.
Sure.
Say, what are the changes here? Let's go through that and then present those to the committee.
Okay.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, sounds good. Pam, you going to do PZ1?
Yes. The next item is for a repurposing of the building at 604 East 9th Street, which, if you recall, was more recently the fish food pantry. Ray Montez of Domino's Pizza, he is seeking a special use permit for a drive-up facility. The new business model for the Domino concept includes customer pickup inside the restaurant and now through a pickup window. This building is very appropriately designed, as when it was initially constructed in 1966, it was actually for a restaurant with a drive-up facility. About 40% of the business is expected to be pickup customers, but that would include both inside pickup as well as the pickup window. The remaining 60% is essentially delivery orders. With the special use request, the applicant intends to remodel the interior of the building, repair the parking areas, repair existing canopy over the customer pickup window, remove and replace the existing pole sign for a monument-style sign, as well as adding landscaping within the parking lot area, and also cleaning up the landscaped areas that have been in place for many decades, replacing the trash enclosure, and removing and sealing off the exterior door and staircase that's at the front of the building that leads to the basement. This did go to the Plan and Zoning Commission on November 14th. It was a public hearing. There were no objectors present. The commission did have some concerns. One was with the access off of East 9th Street and the pickup window. As you noticed out at the site, the pickup window side has its own driveway, and then there's two driveways that lead to the parking lot. Because of the nature of the pickup and the fact that there'll be parking spaces allocated, and again, when you order your pizza, it's almost to the minute of when you can come and pick it up. You pay for it online, so it's not your traditional drive-through window. So we did talk that if, at some point in the future, it becomes so successful at the drive-up window that it's stacking for extended periods of time. Internally, we discussed that there would be opportunities to put a cut-through at the front of the building, which would connect to the main parking lot. We also didn't want to impose closing off that access drive right now because it is an IDOT road, so there'd be an extensive permitting process that would really hinder the process of keeping this project moving forward. There was also some discussion about fencing along the property line adjacent to the apartment development. Overall, though, the commission was very favorable of the project. They did, by a vote of 6-0, recommend approval. There were several conditions that were associated with that. I've identified all the issues prior to this evening's meeting have been addressed by the applicant. And then the other 4 remaining conditions are just standard things that we just wanted incorporated as part of the special use. I believe, are there applicants here? Yes. A representative for the applicant is in attendance if you have any questions. Other than that, we would seek direction to place this on for the December 20th for final action.
All right, crew, anything?
Yeah. Pam, so it's on there. One of the questions I didn't send, the reason they're shutting down the front stairwell?
I'll let them respond to that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, committee. Jim Burnett. I'm the contractor that works for Ray Montez. The wall, there's like a cinder block wall that leads down to the staircase. It's actually falling in.
Okay.
So it's actually got to be redone. We don't need that access to the basement, so it'd be easier just to close it off and fill it in. And
Okay.
Just make sure you talk to your architect. There may be, you need 2 means of egress out of the basement.
Okay.
So don't knock it down or anything yet
Right,
until you
no
find out
problem.
that code-wise you don't need it.
Okay.
That's fine. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, I think it's great. I mean, it's a great reuse of the building. Obviously, the fish food pantry is in town still and has expanded its ministry. It's in a place that's very dignified and very clean. I think what they've done with it has been wonderful, and now to see it back on the tax rolls as a viable business, very excited to see it happen. So, good stuff. Thank you. All right.
So
Yes,
do we want to do consent on this
I
next
don't see
time?
why
or-
not. Any reason not to? All right. We'll put
Consent.
on for consent, please.
Okay.
And Ben, they can't do landscaping out in that island, right? Because that's IDOT.
Probably not, yeah. It probably
But they
goes
will be
back
putting new, really nice sizable islands as the end rows of the parking, in the parking lot.
I think their
So-
landscape plan is great.
Yeah.
Just, if it's just something we could do on 159.
Well, and we're working on that with IDOT and Christopher Burke right now on Phase 1 in a partnership to change the right-of-way and the road lane, frankly, in the channelization from, I think, Summit to Lincoln. So this would be affected by that. So I'd hate to see them do any improvements in there and then have them get knocked down if IDOT changes it, so.
Perfect.
All right, PZ2.
All right, thank you. This next item, Adam Herberg, who is on behalf of O'Reilly Auto Enterprises, has submitted an application as is seeking final development plan approval for the construction of a 7,400 square foot commercial building on Lot 2 of the Lockport Crossings. Lockport Crossings is the development that has the current Advocate office building on there, as well as that existing shopping center where the Enterprise leasing is. The property is part of an overall 12-acre mixed plan use development. Today, as I indicated, there's the 4-story medical building, parking accommodations, 2 large detention areas, a 4-unit multi-tenant commercial building. O'Reilly store will have an average of 12 to 15 employees. The hours of operation will be Monday through Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. They anticipate construction to begin in spring of 2018. The request was heard at the regular meeting of the Plan and Zoning Commission meeting on November 14th. Representatives were present to respond to questions and comments. The commission had a few concerns, one with respect to the retaining wall that's located in the elevation along the northeast boundary. A solid composite fence with retaining wall is proposed. The applicant has agreed to work with staff with respect to the loading area and trash enclosure at the rear of the building. The other concern that the commission had related to additional landscaping being installed outside the fence. When we reevaluated the situation, it's difficult to provide because the area is very small, and the type of landscaping that would be required to provide adequate screening would be too large to be incorporated into that area. So the enclosure will be screened with a 6-foot-high solid fence, and retaining wall will be provided, should be an adequate buffer. There was also some discussion regarding the access into the lot. There's 2 access points that come off the drive that leads into the development. The first access point, there was some concern that it might be too close to 159th Street, and it does appear to be close. We all have acknowledged that. However, it has been reviewed by our development engineering consultant, and it's also in compliance with the 40-foot distance requirement per the city zoning ordinance. Subsequent to the meeting, we have talked with the applicant's engineer to see if there was any opportunity to maybe make an adjustment to that driveway. However, it's not really feasible, given the size of the site and the constraints and the layout. It was also suggested that perhaps an internal stop sign be included on the site, just to slow traffic from exiting out of there. Overall, the commission was in favor of the proposed development. By a vote of 6-0, they recommended approval, subject to several conditions. The first condition, which discusses three items that needed to be completed prior to tonight's meeting. Two of them, they submitted the plans today, so staff is currently reviewing to ensure that it conforms with our required changes. The other item related to the J.J. Bennis memo has also been addressed. And then the three remaining are pretty much standard conditions with all final development plans. The engineer is present this evening if there's any questions or concerns or comments.
All right, very good. Thoughts, crew? Jim, you have nothing?
I'll say it.
You're our architect, I expect him to.
Got the huff over that door.
No,
Aren't you going to question the yellow ADA plates?
all right. So,
I'll add that too.
all right, did you have something, actually?
It's just because the right side elevation is visible from 159th, you see that on there. The front looks okay, like these boxes are boxes, just if there's something they can do on that right side elevation. Landscaping, something, cover it up, because it's going to be very visible as you're driving east on 159th. It's my only comment. I get that the site is tight, I get it, the lighting levels, all that stuff, everything, it's just, if there's something you can do on that, what they're calling the right side elevation.
So, okay, that's the one next to the Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Or is that?
So you would see that as you drive.
You're talking the side that's next to
They may have actually, so it would be the west side's elevation, but their drawing says right side. I
Okay.
see,
Okay.
So it's the one closest to the street, to the entrances.
I got you. So. Yeah, I see what you're saying, it's just a big block.
Right. If there's something we can do, they can do. Right.
Okay. Do you, you said there's still a couple outstanding things. Do we need to do a, like an action item then for this?
We've had communications, so we believe that the plans adequately reflect the changes. We just need to confirm those, but it's up to you. I mean, we can confirm in a memo if it goes on the consent agenda. If it's an issue or concern still outstanding, we certainly can put it on action.
Well, okay, well, perhaps they can just give a little feedback about this landscaping thing that Jim was talking about too, so.
Okay.
Yeah, because I understand what he's talking about, so.
Sure. So either you want something changed on the elevation or additional landscaping installed?
There's something there that can break up that facade, that's
Okay.
just, I get it, it's inexpensive, it's blocks, right? Your front looks really nice, around the auto parts, it's got the red accent. Maybe you can bring some of those design, aspects to that side, because it's very visible on that side. I get the Enterprise side, you're not gonna see it, so that one's buried, that's there. The back side, I don't care, but the visible side, if you can do something.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Ken Heen with HR Green, representing the civil. So in terms of the architecture, I'm going to say I'll talk with the architect in O'Reilly and see what we can do. If we can accommodate something. We do have a 5-foot landscape bed on that side. I don't know if there's something we can do in that amount of space, or maybe there's something they could do on the facade, but we'll work with your staff and come up with something.
All right, appreciate it, thank you.
Well, you also need to update your spec drawings. Some of the things that are being improved with the code are not correct, so just please.
Here, read that code. You get to read the code over Christmas now.
I'd love to read the code. Send it my way.
I mean, you want me to point out the flaws? I will, but I'm not going to take the time.
Oh, good. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so do you want to do a consent then, or do we need it?
Well, we'll leave it as an action item for now.
All right, we'll put an action item. All right, very good. Okay. Any new business there, so we move on? A couple things, just an update. You guys all know the story with the Dunkin' Donuts building, and Amish had passed away. Back on, they poured some cement today, now that they've got out of that, the will and stuff worked out. So I'm still hoping they get the tar poured for the parking lot. My only concern is that the tar plants are going to close any day now, so hopefully they can get that poured.
I think they're.
Shut 'em down?
I think most of them are done.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that parking lot off, so.
It's hit or miss. We're still.
I mean, I was on the developer, I'm like, look, man, you gotta get moving if you're gonna get that thing. But at least still, I imagine they'll keep working on the inside then, now that they've
They can make it concrete.
committed. Yeah, so they got their cement in. You guys probably read Marcus bought the property, Marcus Theater, so that's a great thing, right? I don't celebrate anything, though, until the ribbon's cut, but it's a good first step. They've purchased the property, and they're excited about coming here. We all know we've been pursuing them now for a few years, so it's nice to see that take place. So they'll be back here with probably another month or two, Ben? Is that what I think they mentioned?
February or March, they should be probably to the point where they're ready to present something.
All right, that's good. But,
Hotel submitted drawings, right?
I'm sorry?
Has the hotel submitted drawings?
They have not submitted for their final, but they too, I think, are coming the first quarter sometime.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's good. It's been our long-term strategy to do a number of things to, get this kind of development moving, and it's starting to happen now. So it's been a process, and I appreciate everybody sticking in with the long game, and so good stuff. And yeah, Burger King. That's one of my favorite stories. The Burger King story, which I won't get into. But they're moving forward, which is good. So, all right, friends, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we got Jim and Joanne.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, you guys need 5, or you want to keep rolling?
Takes
Darren, JR's.
a couple minutes to turn the Granicus over.
But it does take a couple of minutes, though, because we got to
Definitely
change the. So just take 2. Just
2 minutes.
takes. Yeah, the pressure's on for you. Start our city council meeting now. Kathy, if you give us a roll call.
Present.
Here.
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 All right, my friends, looking to have a consent agenda tonight. You want to make a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Jim and Jason, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so for our consent agenda tonight, we have the November 15th regular city council meeting minutes, the November 15th committee of the whole meeting minutes. We have our payroll period ending November 19th. We have our various bills. There is the abatement of the JULCO taxes. This is for the Julian Electric light manufacturing that is here. It's for the abatement that we agreed to for them. And then we have an abatement for Magenta Plastics, another manufacturing business that we were able to attract here with a mild tax abatement. So both looking to have those on here tonight. And then there's the proposed property tax levy ordinance number 17035. So we're looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion?
Oh, let's do a roll call.
Yes.
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 All right, let's move on to our impact fee discussion. So, as is our procedure, we'll do a motion for approval.
I'll make that motion.
Darren,
Second.
seconded by Jason. All right, let's have some discussion. So, let me try to bring everyone up to speed. I know there's some anxiety out there over this issue. Last meeting, we had our workshop meeting, which is when we usually have the debate, and school district or people would come in and we'd have this conversation. For whatever reason, nobody from the school districts came to that meeting. This is the meeting you just experienced. That's our city council meeting, our workshop meeting. That's where we talk about these things. So a lot of the stuff I'll say now, I said to empty seats last meeting, but that's okay. Everybody's here now. It's hard to understand how our city council meetings work. But for future stuff, in case you ever want to know, it's our committee of the whole meetings are when we just have discussions and then we vote on things at the city council. That's 2 weeks. Gives everybody 2 weeks to digest it. So just FYI, it's good to know. Doesn't mean we can't discuss things now, though, which we're going to do. But just for everybody's sake here, I'm going to repeat a few things because now we have some folks here who I'd like to kind of bring up to speed on what this is all about. So let me give you just a quick history. Back in the early 2000s, there was big building booms. Not just houses, 20, 30 houses a year, but hundreds of houses going in because we had subdivisions, entire subdivisions being developed, whether it was Creekside or Victoria Crossings or just all these large projects were going on. City Council passed an ordinance in conjunction with the school that says, look, we'll do something that has impact fees for these developments. That will go to the school. And it was agreed upon so that way we could kind of plan for some of these, large, changes in our population. And we went from 9,000 to 25,000. That's, pretty big changes in, a 20-year period. So that's why these kind of ordinances were created. So as time went on and the housing market crashed, we didn't have that anymore. And, people were building maybe 1 or 2 houses here in Lockport for a while. When we came on board here, we did try to come up with a long strategy of how to get what we've all been looking for, which is our retail and our restaurants. One of the big challenges we had when I would talk to those groups was they said, your housing starts are terrible. You have like 0 housing starts, or not 0, they were like 1 or 2, 3 or 4. So we as a council decided, okay, can we get that in a positive trajectory? We're not looking to build giant subdivisions. That wasn't even the thing anymore. What we were looking to do is at least put it in the plus column. So we said, can we reduce some of our tap-on fees? And the reason we had to look at that was because we were the most expensive city in the area to build a home. It was cheaper to buy it right over the border in Homer Glen. It was cheaper to buy a home in New Lenox because they completely did away with their tap-on fees. And so it was very expensive to build here. So we wanted to remain competitive. So what we ended up doing was We approached the schools at that time. I sat down with all the school board members from all the school districts, and I said, how do you guys feel about working together with us to lower our tap-on fees so we can be competitive? The school districts didn't want any part of that. They said, no, we don't want that. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'm not here to, change your mind, but I didn't, want to do nothing. So we agreed as a council to take that burden on ourselves. So we lowered our tap-on fees. And we dropped them, by a decent amount, like 50%. And we started to see a change in our housing starts, which was good. So then when I could go talk to places like Marcus Theater and Panera Bread, which are building now, I could tell them, you guys, it's okay to build here. We're not a dead community. They wanted to see positive housing starts, and we did. We started having 40 housing starts. We started having 50 housing starts. It was all good news. So, and again, not overwhelming, right? Mainly what we were seeing was infill of existing developments. Places like Creekside or Oak Creek, even Sagebrook for that matter, was the last phase of Karen Springs 4 or 5, I think it was. So they're really infill properties. We actually started to sunset that. We started to bring that up slowly back to 75% and then back to 90%. And 2019, we're actually looking at bringing it all the way back to where it was before we lowered it. Then what happened was this. Like 2 months ago, Homer Glen decided to lower their tap-on fees for the schools. They had a discussion at their meetings. They lowered it. Apparently they had no blowback, I don't know. But they also feed into Homer 33C and our high school. But they lowered their tap-on fees. So suddenly we were back again being the more expensive place in the region for homes. So we had a discussion here, and then the other thing that precipitated it was we've been looking at our land cash values, which is something that the schools and the city had to kind of look at to bring it up to market value. I don't want our eyes to glaze over with that, but the schools and the city agreed on something for that, which was good. In that process, we submitted to the schools what their fees for tap-ons would be. This is where everything blew up. So what happened was, when the ordinance was passed in 2004, it had a 4% escalator on it, which meant every year another 4% could be added to the fees that you guys collected at your schools. A lot of the schools never even collected it. They never even added on that 4% escalator, for whatever reason. When our staff submitted the tap-on fees of what they took into account that everybody had been adding the escalator when they hadn't been. So suddenly, in this case, Homer 33C had a tap-on fee that was 24% higher than they'd ever collected before. So they're like, wow, okay, great news.
Impact fee.
Impact fee, sorry. So a developer got, notification that his impact fee suddenly went up 24%. He got very upset, wanted to have, talk about it at council, and that's how this whole thing started. Now, I had been, petitioned by developers for 4 years now to lower the school's tap-on and impact fees because it's our ordinance. I've held off on it for 2 reasons. One, I felt like with our lowering, we were already competitive, and I didn't need to go back to the schools for that. And then secondly, I didn't want to take that money away unless I replaced it. And so we've worked very hard for these last number of years to build up our industrial areas and also our retail. And when we did those things, we were able to replace those one-time impact fee monies that you get from a house that's built with long-term annual property tax money from Panettone, the UPS buildings, all the buildings you're seeing with LG up at the Oak Prairie and all those schools. And these are not just $5,000, one-time tap-on fees. These are hundreds of thousands of dollars of annual fees. So we were able to replace that money for our kids and our students. Our kids all go to these schools as well. And so it was important for us to have money that not just brought it back up to where it was if we were to lower tap-on fees, but went above and beyond. And that's where we were. So between Homer lowering their tap-on fees, the miscommunication about, suddenly jacking up an impact fee by 24%, that's why the discussion came about. So that's the history of it. Now, some confusion now a little bit as I've read and saw some things. We're not trying to eliminate it. There was some talk about it, because that's what we do in our workshop meetings, we discuss things. But we chose as a council not to eliminate it, because we wanted to keep it in place in case it was ever needed again for some future development. Let's say the housing market suddenly boomed. We'd like to have a mechanism where we could go back and put these fees to a place where we thought would be appropriate. So that was one reason we didn't want to eliminate it. And two, we were also willing to take a hit again. Although we were starting to scale our impact fees back up, we said, look, we're happy to go ahead and take ours back down another 40%, but not just our impact fees. We're also doing another fee that you guys don't have, and that is our general impact fee, a general tap-on fee, which is an additional 40% beyond anything we've asked anyone else to do. So dollar-wise, we're taking a much bigger hit so that we can stay competitive. As far as this 80% number, the truth is, it's actually about 56%, because the 80% is off of the number that was artificially inflated with that 24% that nobody's ever collected before anyway. So really the number we're talking about is a 56% reduction. The schools have all agreed with me when they came in that says, look, we agree that we need to stay competitive. Perhaps 40% is the right number. So really, we're kind of arguing about a 16% difference here. And then the reason why I feel like staying firm with our 80% though, is because I'm very confident that we've replaced that money. When you look at, for instance, Panatone, the Panatone development where UPS is now, is bringing in $295,000 annually, not just a one-time tap-on fee like we have for the house. This is annual money that you'll get, you know, for years and years and years, as long as these buildings are there. And we've also taken, you know, and then, so we certainly replaced the money. The high school gets all that money. Lockport Square, even as we're doing Marcus Theater, those things, those will have impact fees that you guys, or not impact fees, those guys will have property taxes that you'll be able to collect. So all these buildings and all the development that we've worked hard to do, and we've just heard, you know, Domino's is coming back on the tax roll. O'Reilly's Auto Parts, that's a new building, that will be on the tax rolls. All those things affect whatever school district they're in. And so we've worked very hard to take care of our kids by providing that kind of money, by doing these developments, even when we've had to take tax abatements. Fittingly, one of the things we just voted on was the tax abatement for Julian Electric and for Magenta Plastics. All the development that you see along the highway, it's not just warehouses. I know people say, oh, it's warehouses, it's warehouses. There's actually some nice businesses there too. Julian Electric, for instance. It's a corporate headquarters that moved here from Cook County, or DuPage County, and they moved here to Lockport with their, 300 jobs. It's light manufacturing, people making things. Magenta Plastics was another one. And we also gave both those companies tax abatements to be here. They were modest. I think it was like $15,000 a year for 5 years. But the payoff is $90,000. I think it's a pretty good payoff to invest 15 to get 90. We did ask the schools if they wanted to help with that. Again, they said no. But I was not going to watch a development like that walk away, because I think it's good for our city, it provides good jobs, and I know that it provides tax money to the schools, even if, you guys didn't want to help invest to get it here. We could have done $7,500 each and got that. Schools didn't want to do that. That's okay. I'm not here to tell them what to do. So we just went ahead and did it ourselves. But at this point, I feel like we have enough revenue for our schools to be able to, we've replaced anything that we're looking to do with a tap-on or impact fee reduction above and beyond. Secondly, I know there's some concern that I've heard about, like, well, what about future developments? There's two things. One, we're not eliminating it, so it can always be changed again as we sit down together and talk about it if some big development were to come. And two, any project that's going to come in that's going to be a subdivision, if it were to ever happen again, it's going to have to go through what's called the PUD process, which is where we all sit down and we decide, okay, what kind of fees can we charge for this? You can do that when it's a development, when it's a subdivision, when it's something that has real big impact. Lago Vista's done that, and other developments have done that. They've negotiated their own impact fees with the schools. So these things can absolutely be done, and we would make sure they were done if there was something large. Everything we're doing right now just keeps probably that steady growth of 40, 50 houses, which doesn't overwhelm. It's something that's manageable. And a lot of those, even out of that 50, A lot of those are Lago Vista, which has absolutely no impact on the children. Some of them are infill houses, like where I live here in the old part of downtown, knocking down a house and putting a new one up. That's a housing start that's in that 50, but they don't pay the impact fees anyway because it's a tear down. So even at that number of 50 that we have, they don't all affect, the school districts anyway. So that was kind of, our view on this and where we're coming from. I do apologize to anyone who felt like any of this stuff was difficult to follow. I oftentimes find that when topics come up and discussions come up at council meetings, when people hear about it, they think somehow stuff was ramrodded through. We have a process. This is our third meeting now talking about this. But if it came across in any way to anyone that didn't understand that part, apologies from me. So that's my piece on it. I see a card here from Christy. Christy, please come on up.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I have obviously something prepared, and I'm going to speak to some of the things you also just mentioned right now. Back in April, I believe, or sometime in the spring of this year, like you said, the districts were approached to get an updated appraisal on a vacant piece of property because obviously the last one done in 2004, land values had changed significantly, decreased significantly from then. So when we did that, Lockport did reduce the land cash fees by 47%. So we already have had a reduction in the total fees we've charged. At that time, that's when it was discovered by the district that we had not been doing the 4% escalation clause. So what I was told is that, we as a district, or any school district, has no authority to change those, and that we should start charging what the new chart was, what I believe you voted on and was enacted, I believe, or in August of 2017. So we did that. At the November Committee of the Whole meeting, it was reported, and you just mentioned the 24% increase because of that catch-up of the 4%. I've run the numbers, and I'm not coming up with 24%. So I don't know if maybe we can work on where those numbers came from, but when I run the numbers compared to what at least Homer was charging prior to the land cash reduced and the 4% escalator being caught up, to now, I'm sorry, prior to now, yes. The fees change, the total, the land cash, and facility fees change anywhere from a negative 3.5% to a positive 7.3. And that 7.3 is on a 5-bedroom house, which most of the impact fees are not for a 5-bedroom house. Also at that meeting was stated that the school districts haven't reported to the city how those fees are being utilized. We do not see that that's a requirement of the current ordinance, nor have we been asked to provide any kind of report. But I can tell you that Homer 33C has collected about $1 million in land cash and facility fees, what I'll call impact fees, from Lockport subdivisions alone. Since 2005. In that time, we've spent $1.7 million for an addition, about $50,000 for a new gym floor, as well as miscellaneous repair and maintenance costs, all for Butler School. There's also other non-construction, non-building costs associated with enrollment growth. For example, we've added at least 7 additional bus routes to pick up those children in Lockport and bring them to our schools. Currently, we're leasing buses. We just entered a new lease for buses, and that is about $13,000 per year per bus. So that's about $90,000 per year for Lockport residents. In addition, a recent facility audit uncovered about $3.7 million worth of projects recommended to be completed in the next 5 years for Butler School. Butler is not the only school impacted by Lockport growth, as all of our kindergartners attend Schilling School, all 5th, 6th graders attend Hadley Middle School, and all 7th, 8th graders attend Homer Junior High. So I'm reporting only on how we've used that money for Butler, but there's other expenses at other schools. While we appreciate that the city's trying to make the total impact fees more competitive with nearby communities to attract development, it's also important that school districts and other entities are prepared for those expenses in space that come with an increase in population. Just so you know, of our 4 elementary buildings, 37% of the impact fees we collect come from Lockport. So the majority of them come from Lockport.
You said 37%?
37%.
Majority? How's that a majority? I'm sorry.
Well, of 4 schools, I'm sorry. If I take all 4 schools, 37% come from Lockport schools.
And the rest come from Homer and New Lenox?
Homer Glen, yes.
Who have either no impact fee or just reduced theirs, correct?
Yes. But this is up until, my calculations are up through October of 2017. It's also important to note that the students enroll in schools before residents begin paying real estate taxes on that improved property. So in calendar year 2017, we have paid property taxes based on the value of our property from January 1 of 2016. Impact fees are imposed specifically to help with the cost of construction and maintenance of the facilities those students are housed in. Therefore, our stance is that imposing impact fees is fair because with the increase in new homes cause an increase in enrollment, which in turn causes an increase in the amount of space needed for these students. Property taxes were raised by council members and you tonight, Mr. Mayor. Right now, school districts are closely following state legislation that could impose a multi-year property tax freeze. This would have a significant impact on schools such as Homer 33C, where property taxes account for the majority of our revenue. Why, by the way, the more we receive in property or local revenue, the less we receive from the state. And because of the way the tax cap works, a property tax freeze would reduce our revenue by millions, not only while that freeze is enacted, but for all future years to come. Also, districts are not double dipping when they collect property tax revenues from both commercial and residential properties, nor are we double dipping when we charge out-of-district students a tuition fee, which was also mentioned at a prior committee of the whole meeting. That charging a tuition fee to non-residents is only fair to our residents who pay taxes to our schools. Lockport 205, Will County 92, Homer 33C, and now we have Fairmont 89 in the audience. We are proposing a compromise and request the council to consider our 40% reduction. This matches the percent decrease proposed for city services, and I've heard 2 reasons why the city's proposing 40% for their services and 80% for the school districts. One reason, I don't know which or if either of these are true, but one was that so that all entities absorb roughly a $4,000 reduction, but for school districts, that means we would only collect about $1,100 while the city would collect $6,000. And the second reason I've read is that the city already, and you already alluded to this, Mr. Mayor, the city already reduced their fees by 40% and the schools have not. But in reality, we did reduce our land cash fees, or our land cash fees, excuse me, were reduced by 47% in August. I agree that with the 4% escalator being added, the impact of the 80% is much lower than 80%. It does come around to 56%. But that also holds true for the 40% reduction. That nets out to about a 30% reduction for the schools. Therefore, we respectfully request that the council consider the district's compromise and vote for a maximum of a 40% reduction in facility fees.
Okay, thank you, Christie, for
Thank
your
you.
words. You know, land cash is just one of those things that's market value. It's not a lot I can change with the market to say whether it's worth this much or not. So those kind of adjustments are just, that's just the world we live in after the 2008 recession. Those probably should have been adjusted years ago. You guys have been able to collect that money at a higher rate that's not the market value for since 2008, so almost 10 years now, we've been able to collect that money. As far as, you know, the other aspect of Homer, they haven't done anything to offset. When they lowered their rates, they don't have any industrial growth that they've put that feeds into any of our schools. We've done that, hundreds of thousands of dollars, far exceeding anything that these one-time tap-on fees have. This is annual and in perpetuity. So those are the only things I would say back. Look, I don't want to be the only one speaking. If anybody has anything else, you're welcome to say something, but unless you guys feel.
Yeah, I have a couple things to say. I appreciate your comments, okay? But we have to understand why this was done back in 2004. And I'll read the very first paragraph. And the very first paragraph in the ordinance says, whereas after due investigation, the mayor and city council have concluded that there will be significant residential development and student population growth within the city of Lockport in a statutory planning area in the near future. And that was absolutely 100% true in 2004. But this isn't 2004, this is 2017. And so what we have to look at before us is what is are we expecting substantial growth as we saw back in 2004 when in the near future applied? Okay, we don't have anything. We have Sagebrook, which is finishing up, which was a original plan. There's a feedback here.
Try to separate your two.
There's which is nothing but Phase 5 of the Karen Springs subdivision, which was planned within Homer 33C and the high school district. Back in 2004 or 5, it was changed, and when it went back, then we brought it back to residential. Okay, so what applied 9.5 years ago doesn't apply today, or back in 2004 does not apply today, and within our development code that we're reviewing, okay, it's chapter 153.3. That's what I wanted to comment on, okay? So the confusion was about the MEI appraisals of the property, okay? It specifically states within our development code, and this language has not changed by one word, that the school districts are to, if there's going to be any change within the I'm going to see any increase, that they have to go ahead by July 1st of every year, provide the city council. Language of that is still in there, okay, within a development code, and it's something that I encourage all the school districts by July 1st of every year is to go ahead and say, and for the school districts such as Taft, where I live, which is getting not a single penny of any commercial development today, tomorrow, or any time in the future, because we have no ability to even go ahead and have this discussion. Okay, where I live. You know, it's the poorest school district in the city of Lockport, and it's in the bottom 10 poorest school districts in all the state of Illinois. That's where I live, okay? So, so it is something that I recommend. I don't know how we do it. I don't know how we do it. If a letter goes out in March or April, say, okay, school districts, okay, is this number, and in Homer 33C's case, $85,000. It went from $155,000 down to $85,000. Okay, $155,000 was probably the right number in 2007. It was not the right number in 2017. And to go ahead and address the so that's, I guess, the school facility. School facility fees are supposed to be used for specific things, okay? They're not to be used for debt reduction. They're not to be used for bonds, okay? They are to be, that's what our ordinance says, okay?
And I know that was brought up, and we did consider using that. We got advice from our bond counsel that it was allowable, but obviously they did not have your city ordinance, your development code.
So into regards to, so the ordinance specifically says and I'll read it here, is that if a fiscal impact statement demonstrates that the costs associated with educating students reasonably expected to be generated by the subject development exceed the projected tax revenues, okay, therefrom, then recipient school districts may use the school facility impact fees to the extent necessary to make up any projected shortfall specifically and uniquely attributed to the subject development, okay? So that's where this whole, we haven't had an accountability, okay? We have no idea. We have no idea that how the money's been used, okay? And if it has been used for, instead of capital, and has been transferred over to operational, well, okay, well, we don't know that, okay? We don't know that it hasn't been done, okay? But nowhere in here does it say that, okay, and it specifically says is that they can use for new school buildings, building additions improvements, school site improvements, and related infrastructure, okay? Not school bus routes, okay?
I'm not saying because I'm just pointing out some of the additional expenses that we incur.
Okay, so now, it is of no fault of anybody in this room that anybody other than me, beginning 4.5 years ago, read any of this stuff, okay? And there's nobody on the school board. There's not one superintendent. There's not one member of the school board, of any of the school boards. There's not one member of the city council or the mayor or any staff who would have known this unless I would have read this back in June of 2013. Okay? So we want to work with the schools. And it is true. We have asked the schools to cooperate with us, and we have been rebuffed every single time.
And that I can't speak to. I don't know when that happened, so.
All right, like I said.
We do want to go forward. We do want to know this.
Okay. We want to work with the schools, okay?
I just want communication.
Okay. So in regards to bringing it back from 80% back to 40%, okay, for me to be comfortable with that, which I'm not, is to go ahead and say we'd have to say that the new property tax revenue from the 3 warehouse buildings that are over in Homer 33C was generated. Now, the numbers that the mayor gave you were not even fully assessed numbers. So it's $295,000 that the Homer 33C collected. The high school collected $595,000. 92 for the last 2 years. They collected, the last 2 years, they collected $646,000. The high school about $595,000. And Homer 33C is only $295,000 for no other reason is the buildings didn't exist 2 years ago. Okay? And so it's a discussion, okay, which we should be a part of. The discussion is the new revenue, which is going to probably double or go up 1.5 times, so in the 750, 800,000 range of the revenue of the 3 buildings. That's a discussion that the residents of Homer 33C, the school board administration needs to have, is how that cash is going to be used. Because in 1 year, it is going to be more than double any potential 40%, the total land cash and the school facility fee. We just take, it's approximately 180 houses in left, which in Sagebrook and Creekside Estates. I mean, not Creekside, Oak Creek, for about $455,000. Now, my numbers for houses is probably not high enough, so let's just round it up to $575,000, which is still less. And that's going to be over a 6, 7, 8 year period of time, which is still less than 1 year that in 2019, for the 2018, fully assessed 2018 numbers, those 3 buildings are going to generate more in 1 year than the next 5 or 6 years with all the impact fees. So it would be my opinion that it's a discussion that should be had with the school district. How is this new revenue going to be used?
Well, are you talking about for what's coming from the
3
industrial building? It's
yes.
not our business. And I don't want it to be our business.
That's why I said it's up to them.
Okay.
Didn't you just just hear, she said we have X amount of dollars, what was it, 3 million that we need to do of upgrades that's coming? That's infrastructure upgrades. How many years does that take to make a difference? And then the next thing is, we've just talked about, we're gonna go from 40,000 projected to maybe, I don't know, the numbers were 68,000. We're gonna need a new building. What does a new building cost eventually?
For an elementary, Mr. Petrakis, I would guesstimate $25 million.
25 million. So how much money in warehouses do I have to cover a new building?
It's going to be a
In
lot
total
more,
of everything.
a lot more than my school district is going to be getting,
Well,
which
this is
is
a big-
zero.
Well, but so that's what we're discussing here, and I think it's a valid discussion, because the schools is a lot of money. That's
Have to
the
do
hardest part of our
what we
tax
did.
bills.
We had to
All
pass a
the,
referendum.
I would
That's
say
what we
this,
had to do.
all the residential that has potential is on the other side of Farrell, which is all Fairmont School District. It's not even Butler. And Fairmont has its own issues with generating any development because their tax is so high by necessity because of the split nature of their district. You know, there's houses that are so valued so low they have to have their rate so high in order to capture enough money. But it really forgoes any new development in there. That one project that came and looked, it never came before council. It's not that I cared one way or another, but they pulled out because they're like, we can't afford to be in this school district. So everything on the west side of Farrell Road is Fairmont anyway, and it's not very buildable just because of those rates. I don't see that changing. And I think it's what Darren says. There's not room for these giant subdivisions and for this big growth. The 40, 50 houses that we've been doing a year, again, are not all in this subdivision. They're not all, impacting this particular district. And as far as like things that got to be fixed, here's the thing maybe I don't understand 100% is that, we've just over the last 4 years, we've done close to $36 million in capital improvement plan, right? That's huge. We've done water, we've done sewer, we've ripped up roads and reconstructed them, we've fixed bridges, we've done a ton of work. And we've done it without raising our taxes. We've kept it level. And we haven't gone into very little debt, right? And yet we're the fourth on collecting taxes. The grade schools collect the most, and the high school, usually the fire department's above us, and then we're fourth. And somehow we're able to make a $36 million improvement over 4 years. I guess, congratulations, staff, right? Kudos. That's an amazing thing.
Very commendable, but the one thing you have that we don't have is a sales tax.
Yeah, there are different funding sources for different groups.
And half of what we do with the infrastructure, half of our budget does go to the police department.
No, I'm actually trying to kind of support your side, is that we have some different funding levers than you
Sure.
do have at your disposal.
But half of our money goes to the police department.
Absolutely, right. Everybody's got their own budgets to manage, right? And it's difficult for everybody, right? And I'll just give my perspective. I think Darren covered a lot of topics. My perspective is not to be punitive for the past at all, right? I didn't know you guys were supposed to provide something on July 1st. You didn't know, we didn't know. That's gone, right? You got the money that was owed to you, and it's your jobs as school representatives to spend it in the way, it's supposed to be within the ordinance we have, but spend it in the way you see fit, and I trust that was done, right? There's a lot of debate on which school district people live in. Up here, frankly, I don't know if that matters much, right? I live in 33C. I'm going to have children going to 33C. I'm very happy being in 33C. But as this came up, the way, there were builders impacted, and that complaint led to some of the things we've looked at. There's a lot of numbers floating around. I've gotten a couple of emails about it. The quotes tonight about total impact from the last couple of years being anywhere from, I believe you said -6 to +7%, something along those lines. Sure. That is very heavily impacted, though. I assume, based on what I've seen, I don't know the numbers you exactly ran, based on the land cash value, right? And that admittedly needed to come down. So the facility fee itself has been no doubt a positive over the years, because we've never reduced it on the school end, which was never part of the bargain, right? But as the mayor said, and as Darren alluded to, there have been a number of times where we've tried to get a little bit more creative to bring development into the city, whether it be the incentives that we voted on tonight as tax rebates, whether it be entertainment districts, whether it be, you know, whatever it might be. We have discounted our fees, we have rebated taxes, we've done a number of things to grow where we think it makes sense. None of the other taxing bodies have really been willing to do that, and that's their right? But that's, you know, kind of the background we had coming into this. Then when this discussion started, and one thing that I think a lot of people don't see, and I just want to take a second to sort of read what we have. We generally compare to some neighboring towns. None of them are ever perfect, but whenever we're going through these exercises, some of the kind of similar size, scope, budget towns. And just to read the school facility fees, right? So if you look at 33C, which is mostly what's generally being vocalized, at least that I hear, there are 3 towns that overlap into 33C. New Lenox's school facility fee is $2,500. Homer Glen's is $5,220. This is for a 4-bedroom house, and Lockport's would be $7,430, right? So obviously looking there, you think, man, you know, we don't really want to, from a Lockport standpoint, we don't want to penalize a builder for being in Lockport versus New Lenox or Homer Glen in 33C. But where it gets, so that's one thing within 33C, but where it gets really, where it at least got really compelling to me is looking at the other towns that we compared to. So Romeoville, in that same scenario, would be $5,220 as well for a 4-bedroom house. Mokina, $2,500. Lamont, 0. Frankfurt, 0. Darien, 0. Lisle, 0. Woodridge, 0. Right? Our school facility fee alone, let alone all the other fees, let alone school land cash of $7,400, is actually higher than the entire impact fee of three of the towns on this list. So as of 2 months ago, when there was no school engagement, when this came to me, I was like, you know, my feeling was this is pretty compelling to look at, right? At that time, I didn't have a number in my head of 40% versus 80%, and again, we were at that time kind of operating on our own with discussions, you know, public, but discussions here of what do we want to do. We sort of came up with, hey, we're going to take a couple of cuts as we've been doing on our fees, and 80% of the school facility fee. Again, you know, school facility fee just jumped up through, you know, just sort of a recognition of a catch-up, and so we're going to bring that back down. I was okay with that. Quite frankly, if that number would have been a slightly different number, I probably would have been okay with that too. You know, a 10% difference in fee here, something like that, is not going to be extremely material. As the mayor and Darren have pointed out, I think that you know, we are going to be adding substantial value to the roles of 33C in forms of non-residential development. This is residential only, and so I'm not totally bent out of shape over the exact dollar we use. I definitely support bringing it down, as I think the schools do as well. There's been a lot of talking points, either through email or online or tonight, and you know, they're true, but I think we're kind of losing the big picture of just, we're not competitive with our fees. We've got to get to a reduced number. You know, frankly, I could take it or leave it if the proposal of 80% is the exact dollar we go with. You know, we can vote on that as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Anything else?
Mayor, if I can, if I first put on my intergovernmental hat before school knows I have to abstain and the board knows I have to abstain, right, the last couple of meetings, but the intergovernmental committee, right, is about communication, bringing that communication together, and I think that's the biggest issue that's right here. There was communication between what was said in the paper, what was said here at the meeting, what we've talked about, what percentages somebody was basing on, what we were basing it on, and going forward. We've been getting better. In all fairness, you are a new administration, right? Even just 33C, new board, relatively new board. We have relatively new administration. We have a relatively new board ourselves. We've been going through our process and cleaning up our policies and procedures, and this is just one of them. We're trying to stay competitive with everything else. As we move forward, it's just about communication. I think we've got more meetings to come and all that, but it is that communication. We're cleaning up our lines of communication because we're all residents in the same thing. I live in 33C. I work for 33C. I do stuff for 33C, and I'm on the board. But a lot of it is just understanding where everyone's coming from and having those discussions ahead of time when we're talking about them, and you know, not having any of these heated discussions that are there. I'll repeat it again. I think this, whatever we're doing, we're trying to clean up our old ordinances. Whatever we do now, we make it simpler. We make things a lot clearer. Just here today, there's enough percentages, and I'm not a numbers guy by any means, but my eyes rolled over. As much as you guys were huffing about the architecture portion of this, you guys start talking about these numbers, my eyes were rolling, because everyone's basing their percentages on something else. So if we come out of this meeting, I think it has to be very clear of what is or was not charged, and what is that, those dollar amounts that are there, so everyone leaves and goes back understanding where they're at. And everyone has to be fair. We have to be fair about it because we're all one community. So that's the bottom line. So with that, I will abstain from further discussion because I do work with 33 cities. So thank you very much.
I would like to ask one question. Can you tell me how full the buildings are currently? Just so I have an idea of where I have, do you know those numbers offhand or not really, if I put you on the spot? How much room do we have? Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
This year, we added 3 new kindergarten sections, at Shilling Elementary. It's putting pressure on that building. 2 years ago, we instituted full-day kindergarten in Catherine, and we brought all the kindergartners to Shilling. And I think some of that was to relieve some of the growth that was happening in that office. So we're inching towards that again. We're looking at, just last year, I remember over Christmas break, we got 10 new students at our middle school, which is it's not a grade level that you generally need in other Christmas breaks. But we're starting to see those spurts again because of increased growth, because the housing market is taking off here. And I would say that with new businesses and new, especially manufacturing, those big businesses, I think we're going to see more growth, residential growth, because those families, those people working in those buildings want to live closer. And your schools are your most important resource, because that's why families choose where they're going to live, because of the schools.
So the reason I asked that question is my daughter is in 6th grade at Hadley, and her social studies teacher has a rolling cart. So her teacher in social studies rolls classroom to classroom. So when that teacher, she doesn't have a classroom. So I know Hadley is overcrowded right now. She said she has 2 teachers like that who have a rolling cart.
You can only imagine the stress that puts on that staff member.
So prior to moving all of our kindergarten students to Shilling, Butler was at capacity, and all of our specialists are music was taught before because every classroom was full at capacity. So that's why at that point the students moved.
One of our main concerns right now is the number of students in kindergarten. What was the percentage increase this year?
I think 24%.
The number is 406 kindergartners, which was a 24% increase. It's right around there from last year. And we've dug into data to try to find out why that happens. And you can only think it's because young families moving in, students coming in, they're all going to the same building. I don't think we have any room to fill with 18 sections. There is no space there. Butler, I think there's 2 of those. Yeah.
So the reality here is, though, right, we're talking about 40 to 50 permits at $1,500.
That's what I was going to get to, if I could ask.
The way that they build a new school is the $1 million bonded from warehouse, if that ever had to happen, right? Not from a $40,000 a year in
tap-on fees.
I think their annual budget is about $50 million. Is that about right?
Yes, and the way we budget.
About $50 million budget.
We don't have the capacity to borrow money without going to a rec run through a bond, through a tax.
Just like a fire department.
Finance bond. What they did, I think maybe 8 years ago, they issued a debt certificate to pay for some of those additions.
If I could finish my point, that if they have a $50 million budget or $48 million budget, whatever it is, I believe I received information that the tap-on fees that they received in 2017 were about $127,000. So, yeah. Excuse me, impact fees.
July 1st to now. Our fiscal year was July 1st.
Well, I received a email from your superintendent that said the fiscal year was $127,000, but, okay. Calendar year, fiscal year, but about 127,000, which is, I don't know what the math is, .02.
Yep, is that total or from the city of Lockport?
Okay. So I think,
Which is that 37% of the new homes you talked about?
Yes, but just not, that's since 2005.
and if we're not reducing all of it, we're talking about less than $100,000 on a $50 million budget.
Right. We're not going to build a new school off of $100,000.
Yeah,
And the money we're replacing with the industrial growth more than offsets anything. It's like tenfold. So you're bickering over, and again, it's not 80% because it's artificially been inflated. It's closer to 56%. I mean, we're talking about a 16% difference here is what we're having this discussion over. 20%. So.
I will go back to what I think somebody who said is the communication. You know, I think Fairhoff agrees that he read about it in the paper. That we weren't told that this was a discussion coming.
That's fair.
And I apologize about that. When we had the first meeting, when the developer came and talked, the next day, or I think 2 days later, I sent an email out to all the school board presidents so that I could say, hey, heads up, we just had this meeting. So it should have been, the legend doesn't come out for another week and a half. So I was hoping that you guys did get the heads up. And then we set up another workshop meeting last week to have this discussion, which is but nobody showed. So in between that, you were here, but nobody spoke.
Can you pull the superintendent's on that email?
I would be happy to. You know what, and I'll blame myself. I just reached out to my, cohorts, the people that, I'm the mayor, I reached out to the school board president, so I did that. Next time I could direct Mayor, or Ben, to make sure that he reaches out to his cohorts in the same thing. So you're absolutely right. And I will take blame for that, because me and Jim had been trying to set up this intergovernmental meeting. It came to the forefront just simply because, developer wanted to talk about it. They have a right to come in here and talk. We're very open about that stuff. But I think I could see where the disconnect happened. I apologize for that. So, go ahead.
Excuse me, Mayor, if you could please just explain, and perhaps someone, from the school district can. I have a hard problem understanding, so Homer Glen eliminated their impact fees.
No, they didn't eliminate.
They
reduced them.
They reduced them. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard, okay, I apologize. So how does that affect you folks, for the school, running the school?
Well, obviously, the impact fees help with the building. I know we cannot build a building of $100,000, but we could fix an HVAC or why you that building.
So did anyone go and sit at their meetings to say that they made a mistake and, you'd like for them to retract, the impact fees? Because if they're feeding into our, Lockport schools and as we are with their schools and so forth, I think maybe the two towns should be working together and maybe have a communication there too, that maybe we need to talk before they reduce it to an amount that's going to have a big impact on the schools, as we are having. I mean, it seems like there's a lack of communication all over. Maybe they shouldn't be doing something like that unless we all talk, because we all share the same schools.
Sure.
No,
there's no doubt. I mean, I think, I did have a question, though. Did you guys go to their board meeting and have this discussion?
I don't believe they would talk us to reduce it by 80%.
Okay, again, it's not 80. It jacked up 24. We're really about 56%. Okay. So, so let's talk, because those numbers were thrown out there and everybody freaked out. So, okay, yeah, because I was kind of interested in, everybody shows up to our meetings and gets upset.
and that's why I brought it up.
And then I'm like, and Homer hasn't done anything to put new revenue into the schools like we have with our industrial growth in those corridors.
And I think villages that do share schools and so forth, I think we all need to have a communication so that we can all be on the same page and be, very alert of what we're doing, because it does have a big impact on the schools. You're right, school districts, how they're graded, and it's very important.
Well, and that's
Because
again.
our prices reflect, on how our school districts are doing.
And again, Joanne, I pushed this topic off for 4 years. I've had developers ask, hey, we got to get that school thing down. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I pushed it off, and I didn't do it. I didn't have this discussion until I felt like we replaced that money for our children, okay? And we did, and then some. So that's the only reason why we're here today having this conversation.
Right.
Otherwise, we did the reductions ourselves to stay competitive.
Chris is in the audience, he acknowledges that.
So I guess one thing that it's good for 33C is there are really only 2 pieces of land left that could be potential residential property. It's the southwest corner of Cedar and Division Street, which is...
It's unincorporated.
It's unincorporated, okay? There's nobody's come before us. I don't know if anybody's ever showed any interest in it over here. It's confusing for me is why not? And then there's a piece of land that goes from Division Street across just west of Victoria Crossing West and crosses over, and it's that strip of land that the county wants to put a road through. It was just also
that one's in the city.
Yeah, well, no, that's not, that's unincorporated.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, but right now is what we've done here is we're fighting the road. It's at least a year and a half before we get the phase 1 study done, another year and a half. We're a minimum of 5 years before anybody would even remotely look at that property, probably looking closer to 10, okay? But in the event that anybody shows any interest for those 2 parcels, specifically the southwest corner of Division and Cedar, you'll be the first ones to know. And if you come back and ask for an increase in impact fees, I'll say, okay.
Yeah, let's talk. And honestly, because, and that's what I said earlier, it's like, you have 2 mechanisms. That's why, we didn't want to eliminate it. We talked about it, but we said, I don't want to eliminate it because I want to keep this mechanism in place. And 2, any of those subdivisions are going to be big enough, if they ever came to happen, to be in the PUD process, which means we can make demands. And we can sit together and yes, as we move forward with our communications, we could say, okay, guys, here's a big one. What are we going to do? And sometimes they don't work, right? I know we had a split council on that one development, but I wasn't feeling like the infrastructure was ready for it. So sometimes, when they're unincorporated, we have a lot more ability to make those kinds of demands if and when the time comes. Otherwise, we have kind of a modest growth that's good enough for, telling our stories about to the retailers. And it's all throughout the city of Lockport, not just Homer 33C. Okay.
I want to point out one more thing, Darren. You missed this piece of property right here. That's in 33C.
Nobody's come to us.
But if someone does come, the impact fee for a 1-bedroom apartment is $3.
Then it's the PUD process.
Then we can change
They
it.
come through.
Yeah.
The school district will go ahead and review it.
Right.
And they will bring it to us.
Because even if
like
it is,
we've been saying all along.
even if it is already incorporated, if it's that large, it's over 10 acres, it still has a PUD process.
No, but I'm just saying, you mentioned some areas, you forgot that area too.
Okay, I'm sorry I forgot that one area.
That's fine, stop.
That is potentially multi-units.
And multi-units, when that one was looking at Farrell, never materialized, but I asked Todd Wernett and I asked Fairmont, we talked about it. I says, okay, what do you guys, how much impact does this have? And they said, well, if it's apartments, they have a formula, and they felt like it wouldn't be problematic. But we have those discussions. We try to keep clear. Again, I apologize for the hiccup on this one, but it's important to us to make sure that we're providing enough money for the schools. All right.
So we do have, basically, there's 2 action items on the agenda tonight. seeking motions to, basically what we're doing is kind of throwing out the old and producing the new. The current motion is to approve the resolution that's been presented. You can amend it with the percentage before you vote. You can amend it on its start date if you want. Right now, it would be effective July 1st. So I guess we're seeking feedback from you and where you want to go from here, but the item on the agenda right now.
That's what's not on the table. What's on the table is
80%.
Is 80%.
Okay, so 80% is on the table, effective July 1st.
80% of the elevated, the artificially inflated impact fee.
Let me read it to you, I guess. Let's be real clear. I'll read it to you. So based on those prior committee discussions, there's a proposal and a motion for an 80% reduction in the school facility fees, a 40% reduction in the city's water tap-on and sewer fees, a 40% reduction in the city's general impact fees with some street maintenance of vehicles and infrastructure fees, and the elimination of the 4% escalator. They would require 2 action votes to approve Resolution 17100A and 17045.
Okay, so, and again, this is our ordinance, which can be changed anytime. Anytime a large development comes, if and when, these kind of things can be, this is what it's for. All right, let's do a roll call on what's on the table then. Kathy, can I have a roll call for 17? We
already have the motion.
We did, because it's already council, yeah, so 17100.
17100A.
Okay. Saban?
Yes.
Petrakos?
I abstain.
Bergbauer?
Here.
Done.
Yes.
Thanks. Welcome.
That was awfully amateur of you.
Sorry. Really. Get her back, Darren. That's an amateur move. That's a rookie move.
I even had the word written down.
Your vote?
That's an aye.
That's an aye.
Okay. Galogly?
Yes.
Vandermeer?
Yes.
Deskin?
Yes.
Bartleson?
Yes.
And Peretta?
No.
All right, and now for our fees, 17045. Roll call on that too.
Okay. Saban?
Yes.
Petrakos?
I abstain.
Bergbauer?
Yes.
Galogly?
Yes.
Vandermeer?
Yes.
Deskin?
Yes.
Bartleson?
Yes.
And Peretta?
No.
Motion passed.
All right, thank you for discussion, appreciate it. We understand the concerns, and if these things change and the world changes again, we can be right back here looking at how we can make sure we maintain what we need to maintain for our kids. All right. Anything else for new business before we close? All right, looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.